Hi, I'm Dávid Turczi. Most people probably know me as the designer of Anachrony, but today I'm here in my capacity as one of the designers and one of the developers of PSC games. And we've recently released Rome and Roll, the first heavy Euro roll and write hybrid set in ancient Rome. And we've had a Kickstarter for Defense of Procyon 3, and we've got many more plans for the future, and I'm here to talk about those. I'm here to talk about my other games. I'm here to talk about my solo modes. Lots of people seem to know me for, yeah, pretty much these. I often get the question, how did the idea of heavy roll and write come around? Nick and I, my co-designer Nick Shaw and I, we've worked together many times in the past. He's one of my solo developers and frequent playtesters, and we worked together on a game called Welcome to Dino World, which was my first exposure to the roll and write genre. And during development I kept asking questions like, ooh, can we add this? Ooh, can we add that? And the publisher and the product manager will keep shutting it down, because you don't do that in a roll and write. A roll and write has to be scalable, it has to be small, it has to be simple, the interaction has to be very indirect, if any at all. And I kept asking, why can't I put more in? And when the project finished and we shipped what was still one of the heaviest, if not the heaviest roll and write around, I said to myself and to Nick, look, next time we're designing a roll and write, why don't we turn it on its head, and instead of treating roll and write as a product form, as a, tiny box, 1-2 million players, no interaction, scratching on your paper game, why don't we treat it as a mechanism? Why don't we make a proper Euro game, what me and what I always like to do, and just have rolling and writing in it. And this was 2 years ago, height of the roll and write popularity craze, and all my publishers were asking, hey, when are you getting us a roll and write? And I asked PSC, so can I do that one with a historical theme? And they said, sure, why not? First we started on something inspired by the Quartermaster General series, but war is about mobilizing stuff and getting stuff somewhere and blowing things up, and those are not concepts that are easily shown using writing and permanence mechanisms. So I was like, okay, we need to pick a different theme. And then came the idea of, hey, let's rebuild Rome. Everybody loves Glory to Rome, so how about we make a game that's nothing like Glory to Rome? And that's where we started, building Tetris-shaped buildings on a shared board of Rome, and then came the dice drafting, then came the variable buildings, the asymmetric player powers, and the whole thing just pretty much escalated from there. The advantages of roll and write format to me lies in the compactness. It's easy to set up. Rome and Roll takes 3 minutes to set up. You separate out the cards, you pick 2 of every suit, you put it on the table, you take a player board and you start playing. There is no chits to sort, there is no cubes to split, there are very few cards to sleeve, there is no punch board in the game at all, and so on. The other big advantage I think we brought out with the help of roll and write is the natural way of marking things. When you get something if this was a Euro game, then there would be a dual layered player board with cubes in it, which you'd have to put in, and then the cost would be hidden underneath, and then it unlocks the benefit next to it, and everything just requires more space, bigger boards, more iconography to relate. Whereas here it's just, you tick it off, done. And yes, the resources, people are more used to handling them as I gain a stone and I spend a stone, as opposed to what we did with the writing the names and then writing the letters of the resource and then crossing it out. But I find that this was a small price to pay for the low setup, the low cost, the small table footprint for a big game, and the natural interaction that instead of having to measure the polyominoes, you just take and write whatever you want, and we could have abilities that change their shapes and come up with new patterns for future expansions or stuff, because we were not limited by what fits on a punch board. We were not limited by how small can these tiles be and still have enough information on them. We were just like, the user can write that letter in it and we're good. So to me, these are the main benefits of a roll and write genre: the flexibility to make anything that you can do with a pen part of your user interface. Roman roll is not my only genre bending product of late, including with PSC. We've had another campaign in the spring for Defense of Procyon 3. I always explain it to people that it's a Eurogamer's war game, but it also has lots of cards with lots of text on them. So, and every rule is thematically invested. So, and a Ameritrasher with a penchant for strategy would feel right at home as well. So, to me, this is my Venn diagram middle point between thematic gaming, strategic gaming, and war simulation and combat simulation gaming, i.e. war games, Euro games, and Ameritrash. And to me, it's always a how can I get the best of more and more worlds? And Procyon was the project where I said no compromise. We don't have to represent things with a cube. We don't have to be nice and do a little engine building on our board. Let's go. And because it was a 2-team game, I could allow for bigger conflict and make it feel like a war game, make it play out like a war game, but make you playing it not feel like you playing an old school war game. Lots of people say I don't play war games, but what usually they mean is I don't play hex and counter combat simulations with lookup tables, and Procyon is most definitely have none of those things in it. I get asked the question, what would I say to other people who want to mash genres together like this? Please, if you have, if you can pinpoint what you like about each box. Eurogames, I like that you can have a strategy, you can care for the strategy of the other, there is secondary interactions, there is build-up, there is replayability, there is predictability, fundamental strategies. Ameritrash really like because it's exciting, it's thematic, it tells a story, and war games we like because who doesn't like pushing soldiers around on a board and how my people are now in place and I will destroy you, and it gives you that feeling of a victorious general. And for many people, war games also include the historical accuracy and simulationist approaches, whereas here we specifically picked science fiction settings so that I can reproduce the excitement of a war game, but I'm not bound by any customs of it. So if I had a mechanism that worked better with the aliens spawning reinforcements out of dead human fallen soldiers, then we molded the lore to say, hey, they can consume biological materials. So the more things you want to mash, the harder it becomes to not disappoint either end. But I think the trick is pinpointing what makes that particular genre work for you and for your direct audience, and fit them together on a system level, which is where usually the hard thing is, to get the best of the things and not the weakness of both things. My advice for the designers looking to develop mechanisms is pretty obvious, I would say. Obviously, if you're not into the medium interactive strategy Euro games, then take everything I say with a grain of salt, because that's my hometown, so that's where I know how to play around. It's all about strategic justification. if thing A is in a game and I can choose between thing A and thing B, then there should always be a reason to pick thing A, there should always be a reason to pick thing B. I should have my slight preference over one or the other, but I should be excited which you're choosing, and then me having chosen one once or twice should reshape that choice on the third time to not make it samey, to not make it obvious, to not make it basically justify everything with choices. Why would I pick this? Why would I pick not this? Why would I pick the same thing over and over again? And why would I not just always pick the same thing over and over again? And if you keep answering these questions every time, then what remains will be eventually fundamentally interesting. And then you add the who are we, what are we doing, the narrative integration, which in a Eurogame is paper thin but should be there because it helps teaching. And in a thematic Euro or a Numeritrash or a wargame hybrid, it should be thick because it tells the story. You need the story needs to make sense, and the story needs to map to the mechanisms. You can't have a game about investing into the racing horses involve I don't know, deck building, because I just said something random. If it's a terrible idea, ignore it. Because how does one model the other? If you have a genius deck builder mechanism, pick a setting that is modeled by the reusable actions, by the fattening and the thinning of the deck, etc. So make the game's mechanisms tell the story that your game wants to tell, and then make sure that every choice along the way itself is interesting. After that, it's just a matter of having enough ideas, and eventually one of them will be a good one. And just keep trying until you find one that inherently solves the problem you're trying to solve. And I know, easy for me to say, that's the easy part, or the hard part if you look at it that way, but mechanisms very rarely are a new thing. Most usually it's a cool visualization combined with a natural narrative. That's what we are looking for in modern nice gaming feel. That said, I don't have a unifying game design theory. As long as the choices are there, as long as I am not bored on other people's turns, as long as that interaction is not just I'm rushing for this, you're rushing for that, see who gets there first, but as long as I'm engaged with the game and engaged with the game's story, the game's mechanisms present tough choices every step of the way where I go, well, I want the other one, then the rest is just picking tools off a shelf. And the more good games I play, the more good games you can play, the more tools you will be aware of. And the rest is just finding questions that nobody have answered lately. Wouldn't it be cool to have a two-team asymmetric game where every player played a completely different game? This is a question that nobody has recently answered. Then I integrated the story, then I made sure every mechanism is at every point you want to go both that way and that way, but you can only go one way, and it keeps bifurcating like that. And 2 years and a lot of headbanging into the wall later, Procyon is now a thing. And this could describe most of my recent projects. For example, from another publisher, Board and Dice, Tekenu just came out like a week or two ago, and the center question there was, could we have a bunch of available actions where the relative prices change in a clockwork-like fashion, and we needed a cool visualization for it, which was the shadow of an obelisk going around touching these action spaces. And then everything else, the dice drafting mechanism, the 6 mini games actions around it, all came in the service of this idea of, hey, we have a cool question with a cool visualization that we need to answer with mechanisms that create choices. None of the individual mechanisms are that complicated or inventive, but as long as your primary premise is different and your integration is good, then the game will work on the strategy Euro level that I work on. If you're working in, light engine builders for the family plus audience, then you have to work completely differently. Then you have to find one hook that keeps working over and over and gives a nice feeling of satisfaction that builds up. But there is no one key to solve all board games, because if there had been, then somebody would have found it by now and we'd be all pretty bored. So, good luck molding your own, dig the statue out of the marble, as they say. I'm lucky enough to have found enough success that people ask me, how is success possible? What's the trick? And Anachrony got there. Hopefully Tekken will get there. Is there something a designer can do to on purpose get there? Learn from people who've done it better, I would say, is the first step. And then the second step is get the feel of your audience. BGG has biases. They prefer either games with expansive stories and worlds, or streamlined Euro mindbenders. And my expertise lie with the latter. So with Tekken, I very much set out to what made Tolkien work, what made Barrage work, what made any of Alex Pfister's games work. How can I distill that to fundamental choices so that the people who enjoy making those kind of fundamental choices in those games will be predisposed to love this? And it's like designing the new fashion. It's like, look what they liked and learn from it and change it, but change it in a way that it feels both fresh and familiar. So it's not enough to make a game that you and your buddies like. It's important to make a game that the audience is asking for. Sometimes I try to push the envelope. Both Roman Roll and Procyon are all about envelope pushing. They're all about, can I do something vastly different than what most people have done before? And at first, I don't expect any of them to be hugely successful. I'm expecting them to get a niche following of people that it clicked with, people that were willing to give it a chance, and I'm hoping that they'll keep building up. Anachrony was a very, dare I say, straightforward Euro engine builder game that got sold to new masses because of the amazing theme, which is mostly Victor and Richard from Mindclash idea, and once it was on their table, they were willing to delve into a rather big, rather wide, but also deep strategy point salad, essentially. And people who probably would have never tried a big, heavy, dry game tried it out and went, "Oh, this is smart." So with Tekken, I came from the other side. It's like, can I sneak to the people who like the dry, smart Excel sheets and give them system integration instead of ooh, can I score points from this system? Can I score points from that system? The game does this, but with the system integration of every action feeds into the next one. Every action makes a tiny bit of thematic sense, as much as you expect from a Euro, and because of that, people who like big thematic Euros but are ready for a bit of condensed brain burn will try it out and like it, and people who love the condensed brain burn will see something new, because most of those games are just a tough mountainside to climb a bit up on, and then the game ends and you wish you had 7 more actions. But with Tekken, that feeling combines with the system integration of the bigger projects I've worked on. So I even forgot where this question started. So is it possible to design for success? Yes, but it's hard because it's also the product that has to be successful, which is publisher, artist, marketing, and you as a designer might have no control over, and I'm lucky to be in a position where I can work with these people that I trust to take care of publishing, art, and marketing. But if you're trying to do something wildly different, then make sure it really works. If you're trying to do something that everybody else is doing, then make sure that it's different just enough to go, this is worth playing over that other game. And once you can do the two of them together, then when you push the envelope, you do more of this, a bit of that. When you want to climb the popularity charts, you do the other one and less the envelope pushing. I haven't cracked the code yet entirely. I'll let you know once I can put out the top 100 game every second year. These days, half of the questions I get though are about my solo modes, because it started with an acronym needing an extra stretch goal, and I designed a solo mode for it. Then on Dice Settlers, this was one of the selling points, and then after that I did the solo mode for Cerebria and Teotihuacan, which were not my games, and those took off wonderfully as well. So these days, half of my work is playing other people's games and telling them how I would make solo modes for it. And yet there is the recurring story that I myself don't play solo modes at all, and in a way I think that's what made me a good solo designer, because people who are playing a lot of solo games looked at what solo games exist, and me having never played and since then still barely play or not play any solo games, I looked at what I think solo games should be. I like strategy games because of my build-up, because of interaction, because of being excited what's gonna happen, because of feeling in control yet vying for control with you, the opponent. And most solo games don't do that. And I didn't know they don't do that, so I just designed a slightly more complicated solo mode that did that. And then after that, once you get somebody hooked on what I call the interactive solo modes, there is very little going back, because they feel like playing the actual game. Whereas non-interactive solo modes, beat your own scores, complete this challenge, they don't. They often feel like 2/3 of the game or half of the game. And once I've done it successfully once, twice, 3 times, then after that it became a pattern to I play the games in 2-player, take notes of what are the interactions, where do I care what my opponent is doing, where can my opponent throw a spanner into the works, where can I stop the opponent, if I completely ignore the opponent, what can they run away with. And then I make a bot that in a predictably randomized way does all these things. And if it's as simple as a worker placement block, then of course the bot needs to place workers. If it's buying cards from a market, then of course the bot needs to take cards from the market. These are the obvious ones. The not obvious ones come from the interaction of the game, and those are the where I always say is that the better the game is, the better the solo mode is. In Kanban, you care which of you gets the first spot of the day, because different tiles move in different ways depending on who pushes them. But also it matters for blocking the next base next round, so the bot has to do all of those things. Or and also there's predictability. If I look at your board state in a 2-player game, in most strategy games I'm talking about, I can tell what your sensible moves next turn is gonna be. Are you gonna go get more resources? Are you gonna build another building? Are you running low on workers? And based on that, if there are 3 choices for me and I want 2 of them, but I see you're completely unable of taking one of them, I know that I should rush for the one that you might take. Now I should be able to look at the bot state and say, okay, the bot might take this action or might take that action, but it's definitely not taking that the third one, so the third one can wait. Let's rush for the second one because I might lose it. And this is where the predictable randomness comes in. Instead of having a big deck of AI cards and flip the top one and something happens, have on the bot's turn, the bot's gonna take this, or this action, and have a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, or a 50, 30, 20% odds to one of those three options happening, and then you can hedge your bets and hope that you can beat the bot to the next big action, and that makes the players feel like they're playing against somebody, and that's an extra excitement that solo games traditionally did not provide. So this, I think, is the theory of it, is don't make the solo game as good as you think it can be, make the solo game as good as the multiplayer game, full stop. Nothing less than that is applicable. And if this system only breaks down in low interaction games, because in a low interaction game you build your own stuff, you feel nice about it, then you score and you find out whether you've done better than the other. And if it's a low interaction game, then you don't want to get distracted running the bot just so it can give you a victory point target at the end. At that point you might as well have a fixed challenge and say, hit this, you win. And that's the classic beat your own score or meet a challenge type of games. Like, obviously Terraforming Mars comes to mind first, but I'm sure I could think of better examples. But now, having worked on enough solo modes, I've come to the point where not every game can be done in a high interaction bot way. So now I've finessed the theory. Meet challenge games are fine as long as the bot is making it actively hard for you, as opposed to just you playing your own game, and the bot's ability to make it harder for you is under your control. And at that point it feels like, again, a non-directly interactive multiplayer game. And to me, that's the thing that every solo mode should do: keep up every challenge of the multiplayer game. What's next coming from me? Ooh, that's a very loaded question, because I can talk about it for hours and hours. With PSC games, we are currently finalizing the files for Procyon, but we already know what's next. There are expansion parentheses S planned for various projects. There are sequels planned to various projects, and there are 2 or 3 very exciting, very big projects that I can't reveal yet. But we've got lots of talented game designers. Some of you have just recently started learning about, some of you will learn in the future, but you're in for a ride, and PSC has some very exciting plans for 2021, so watch this space. For my other publishers, Board and Dice, my very next game coming out is Tawan Tinsuyu, which is a Spiel digital release. It's a worker placement, Mesoamerican themed, tight economic game, but I always point out that while it looks like Teotihuacan and Tekkenu, it feels more like Anachrony. So I'm hoping that fans of both genres will come together and check it out. And next year we have a new expansion for Teotihuacan that this time I helped Daniela out. And then there's Mindclash. Obviously, we had the big Perseverance campaign in the summer. Dinosaurs, dice drafting, multiple games strung together into a campaign. Very exciting stuff. We're working on the 3rd and the 4th episode of the Perseverance saga, and we have a new game coming out mid next year that we haven't yet announced, but it's gonna have spaceships in it, which is a first for Mindclash, so it's another very exciting. And besides that, Osprey has announced Imperium, a historical Civ deck builder game with 16 unique civilizations, lead designed by Nigel Buckle, and I myself have helped out a lot. And Nigel is one of those people that I'm now working on with multiple projects, including one for PSC. So soon you will find out. Very lots of exciting news coming for next year. I have a game coming up with Richard Breese of the Key fame, Keyside. Hopefully it's gonna come in 2021 if, you know, universe allows. And I'm sure I have a million other projects that I'm right now either forgetting or not yet allowed to reveal. So, but you can tag me on Facebook, message me on BGG. I'm always everywhere. So if you have any questions, just follow up and ask me. Thank you very much.